For those seeking further in-depth information concerning the Church of Christ movement founded in the early 1800s by Thomas and Alexander Campbell, Barton W. Stone, and Walter Scott, please contact Christian Answers of Austin, Texas. Free newsletters and other information on this subject are available by simply calling or emailing us. Access our online videos on Church of Christ and other Campbellite movements on Yahoo Video. Once on the Yahoo Video's homepage, put Larry Wessels in the search box and click Enter. To see the entire 22-hour debate between Bob L. Ross, the author of Campbellism, Its History and Heresies, and the nationally known Church of Christ preacher Bill Jackson, go to Yahoo Video.
He's the head and founder. In fact, Robert Richardson, who wrote this Memoirs of Campbell, you have it lying here on the table, he called him the master spirit. Kind of like Thomas Warren in the McGarry spiritual sword cult. He's the head of that cult, so to speak. The tacit head, titular head, or whatever. Now, you notice he didn't deal with the issue, though? The issue is, has the church been restored? And if it was restored, who did it? If Campbell didn't do it, if Stone didn't do it, if Thomas didn't do it, if Scott didn't do it, who did it, Bill? You said it's been restored. Who did it? You know why he's dodging this? Because he can't get a church restored without scriptural baptism, and you can't get scriptural baptism according to his doctrine by what Alexander Campbell did. I still ask you again, why didn't Alexander Campbell go to one of these churches of Christ you've been flashing up here with these road signs and get baptized? There wasn't one around. There just weren't no Church of Christ for Campbell to go to. Boy, if you'd been around with those road signs, you'd been a lot of help to him, wouldn't you? You could have showed him the way to Revere, Massachusetts, and he could have gone up there to those Congregational Pedo Baptists, and they could have sprinkled him. Because that's what it was. It was a sprinkling church. I showed it to you last night. Cotton Mather preached the ordination sermon for Mr. Cheever, and I showed it to you. And it was a Pedo Baptist, a sprinkling Presbyterian Congregationalist Pedo Baptist church. Then it turned Unitarian. Then it turned Masonic Lodge. And the Historical Society told me now it's used as a mental health institution. Well, I don't know what it would have been by the time Alexander Campbell had come along, and Bill would have said, now, Alex, you don't have to go down there to Matthias Lewis, that Baptist. Let's go up to Revere, Massachusetts. They got a good Church of Christ up there, and it's pastored by Thomas Cheever, and he's a good Pedo Baptist preacher. I don't know if he's going Unitarian just yet, but we'll check in on that, and we'll get scriptural baptism for Alexander Campbell, and he won't have to go down there, that Baptist preacher, and Bob Ross won't be able to tell about that later on. Well, I'm glad Bill wasn't up there. I'm having a lot of fun out of this. He's trying to make a Church of Christ, a bona fide McGarry Church of Christ, out of a road sign. Now let me give him another one. Get that Mormon church sign up there. Hey, if he can make a Church of Christ out of a Pedo Baptist church, a Unitarian Baptist church, or whatever you want to call it, or what am I saying Baptist here for? Getting carried away. He's even making Church of Christ out of Baptist churches, isn't he? But listen, if he can make a Church of Christ out of a Congregationalist church, he can make one out of a Mormon church. Now look at here, Bill. Your old buddy Sidney Rigdon, who was a bosom buddy of Alexander Campbell for a while, he took notes for him when he would debated with McCullough and learned that baptism was in order to obtain remission of sins. Then he hooked up with Joseph Smith, and they went over here in 1830 and formed the Mormon Church and called it the Church of Christ. Well, now, that's interesting, isn't it? We got a Mormon Church of Christ now. He's got a Congregationalist Church of Christ. He's got a Baptist Church of Christ. He's got a Mormon Church of Christ. But he's not a member of any one of them because he's a member of the one that Campbell started. And that's the Restoration Movement Church of Christ. And you know, he hadn't baptized Campbell yet. He hadn't got him scriptural baptism yet. When are you going to get him baptized, Bill, with some scriptural baptism? You're not a member of the Mormon Church of Christ, are you? You're not a member of the Revere, Massachusetts Congregationalist Church of Christ, are you? You're not a member of the Baptist Church of Christ over there in England, are you? You're a member of the Alexander Campbell, Barton Stone, Thomas Campbell, Walter Scott, and on down the line Church of Christ, aren't you? You graduated from David Lipscomb. David Lipscomb was baptized in a box by Tolbert Fannin. Tolbert Fannin was the personal friend and protege of Alexander Campbell, from whence he got his doctrine and handed it down to Lipscomb, from whence you got it at David Lipscomb College.
He never did tell us exactly how Acts 2:38 should read, should have been translated to convey God's truth concerning baptism and remission of sins. And I quoted Thayer. Thayer said, in order to obtain the forgiveness of sins. He's romped and stomped that it can't mean to obtain, yet he never did explain the difference in to obtain the remission of sins, or with a view to the remission of sins, or to receive the remission of sins. He never did explain that if baptism is a sign and a seal and a demonstration to the world and others, that then when the eunuch was baptized in a deserted place, how many of the world and others were there in order that they might witness it and have that demonstrated to them? He did not. He did not and could not extract himself from the blunder in stating in Mark 16:16 that the salvation there mentioned is future salvation, which would still mean that one would have to believe and be baptized before he could have future salvation. Therefore, if he believed and he was not baptized, he could not have that future salvation. Therefore, the man is in apostasy. He's fallen from God's grace. He's going to lose his Calvinism if he doesn't watch it. He did not and could not extract himself from the admission that he was bound to the Bible because the Baptist confession told him to be. Now, that was his statement, friends, and that's the way he put it. The first article of the Baptist confession bound him to the Bible. I'm very thankful that one can pick up the Bible, never notice another piece of literature on the face of the earth, have only the Bible, and the Bible's own statements will bind him in his obedience to God's will, and his faith in the Christ will bind him to the Word of God. Number 16, he never did explain how his man Spurgeon was said to have never departed from New Testament faith and did not use the mechanical instrument of music, and yet Ross does. He never did explain that difference. He never did deal with a believer in John 8:12 when I begged him to tonight. How that those who were called believers would not confess the Lord, and I asked him, were they still saved when confession is essential to be saved? By his doctrine, he'd have to say yes.
To see the entire 22-hour debate between Bob L. Ross, the author of Campbellism, Its History and Heresies, and the nationally known Church of Christ preacher Bill Jackson, go to Yahoo Video. For those seeking further in-depth information concerning the Church of Christ movement founded in the early 1800s by Thomas and Alexander Campbell, Barton W. Stone, and Walter Scott, please contact Christian Answers of Austin, Texas. Free newsletters and other information on this subject are available by simply calling or emailing us. Access our online videos on Church of Christ and other Campbellite movements on Yahoo Video. Once on the Yahoo Video's homepage, put Larry Wessels in the search box and click Enter.